is our 2024 Financial Aid Night. I'm Jen Nectarline, joined tonight by Kristen Isaacson from Monmouth University, who will be doing our presentation. We're glad you could join us this evening to learn about the financial aid process. Tonight is really geared just toward that. I'm going to talk a little bit about at the beginning about a couple housekeeping things as it relates to Central and our financial aid and scholarship process. But after that, I'll turn it over to Kristen, who's going to talk about the financial aid process. This is really geared towards seniors. I'm actually seeing who's joining us tonight, a lot of senior families. Certainly if you're tuning in with a junior or an underclassman, this is just good information to kind of tuck away for future years, but we're really gearing toward our families who are going to be applying for financial aid through this winter for their child's upcoming freshman year next year. So we're going to get underway. Just a couple of housekeeping things I want to share. As you can probably imagine, we're here at October 10th. We are in the thick of going through the college application process with our seniors. It has been a really busy couple of weeks. We're really proud of them. They're working really hard on applications. And I want to reiterate to our families tuning in tonight, we're going to discuss financial aid, is that this process definitely is discussed. It's coming up. Students are already asking about the FAFSA and filling it out. So that's why we have this. But the other piece our students tend to start talking about is scholarships. And when we met with our seniors in September, we reiterated to them that the scholarship process is something we spend a lot of time on at Central. We have a lot of scholarship opportunities, including a local scholarship program that's going to run in early 2025. We put out a lot of different resources about how to find scholarships, and some of that is already available on our website, which I'll show in just a moment. But our main focus for these first 3 months of the year is really helping our seniors push through the application process. We're coming up on our first big deadline of October 15th next week, followed by our most popular deadline of November 1st in just a few weeks. So if your students have questions about scholarships, please encourage them to keep their eye open right around Thanksgiving or just after. And that's when us as a senior counseling team are really going to start to push out scholarship information. We'll be discussing the upcoming FAFSA, which you can begin in December. So we just encourage them to stay tuned, be patient. A lot of that is coming. A lot of that doesn't even come up until the winter, and that we're just going to spend these next couple of weeks and months focusing on actually applying for admission. So a couple resources on our website I want to share. I'm actually going to share my screen before we turn things over here to Kristen. The first thing I want to show you is just a few slides that came from our general counseling department. I'm sure some of you have heard that there's a graduation requirement in place for the current senior class of 25, down to our current sophomore class, the class of 27. And that is this, that signed into law in January of 2024, all graduating high school seniors in New Jersey are required to complete the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, or the New Jersey Alternative Financial Aid Application, the NJAFAA, in order to receive a high school diploma. So we've mentioned this to senior parents. An email came out earlier this year that in Genesis, our student information system, senior families have been asked one of the following options: if they'll be filling out the FAFSA with their child, or if they're going to be submitting the opt-out waiver with their child's counselor. And we have had hundreds of families already complete this, so thank you. But just note that that is in Genesis. If you don't qualify for the FAFSA, or you wish to request that your student is waived from the requirement, you just have to complete that waiver form. It must be complete by May 1st, and it is available on our website. So I'm actually going to take you over to the Hunterdon Central website. I am here under the counseling page, and in the college and career services area, we have a link for FAFSA information and financial aid information. The FAFSA information that I just went over is all summarized here, along with a link to the waiver form. And in the link just below that, financial aid information, here on the Hunterdon Central website, there's a couple different things. These are links to documents that you may hear Kristen mention tonight in our presentation. A recording of tonight's presentation is going to go here. And anything additional that we receive this year regarding the financial aid process will either be put into one of these two links. So these are just good landing places for Hunterdon Central families to find updated information about the FAFSA requirement and the waiver and financial aid information. I also want to draw some attention to the scholarship information page. We will update that quite a bit throughout the winter as we get closer to that process. But just in the meantime, several reputable search engines for scholarships, and then eventually our 2025 local scholarship program, which is all of our local county scholarships, will be posted here. And again, that is February 2025. So if you're kind of navigating that right now, you're going to see that that information is from last school year. We'll get that updated. So a couple different things here in the College and Career Services page that I just wanted to draw your attention to. But at this point in time, I've gone through my list. Just a reminder, we are recording. This will be available on HCTV on our YouTube station within a couple days. So if you know someone who had a conflict or couldn't attend or listen in tonight, just know that we're going to get this posted, our annual financial aid night. So I'm very fortunate that she has stuck with us for 17 years, that's an accurate number, Kristen, right?
Okay.
So I started at Central 17 years ago, and at that time we were looking for a new financial aid speaker, and I found Kristen Isaacson from Monmouth. So she has been with me all my years at Central, and we're so grateful that she joins us every year to deliver expert information about the financial aid process. So I am going to turn it over to Kristen Isaacson from Monmouth. At this time, though, please, any questions you have throughout the evening, we will conclude this by 8 p.m., but please put them in the Q&A, and then we'll ask Kristen some of those at the very end, and we'll keep that recording. All right.
Okay.
The floor is yours, Kristen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Let me get set up for you all here. Okay. All right, everyone. So here we go. So yes, my name is Kristen Isaacson. I'm Associate Director of Financial Aid at Monmouth University. Tonight, my presentation is general in nature, trying to give you helpful information about the financial aid process. We are going to spend a good chunk of time talking about the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. I will talk about sources for aid, types of aid, and also, of course, give you tips and recommendations as I go throughout the program. So to get started, I do want to let you know when the FAFSA will become available. Again, FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So the first word is free. There is no cost to complete the FAFSA. It is the application for all of the federal aid programs. So that means federal grants. Those are items that do not have to be repaid. The federal student loan program, and also the federal work study program. For students remaining in New Jersey, the FAFSA also will automatically be sent to the New Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority to determine eligibility for state aid. And there may be schools that use the FAFSA to determine their need-based aid as well. So it is a multifunction application for aid. At this point, we are expecting the FAFSA to be available on or before December 1st, 2024. Why don't I have that as a solid date on there? Well, because this is the information that has been provided by federal student aid. Currently, the application is in a testing phase. They are beta testing the application. The testing began on October 1st, and they are expecting it to wrap up by December 1st, with then an expected launch date of December 1st, 2024. Obviously, if things go quicker than that, it may open sooner, but I would mark my calendar for December 1st as the beginning of the 25-26 FAFSA. And this application is the one that is needed for seniors. For any juniors that are in the audience, you have a year from now to be completing, then you'll do the 26-27 FAFSA. Some other things to know about the FAFSA, just so that everyone is all on the same page. I do want to make you aware. Actually, I'm going to make you aware of those items on the next slide. So let me move to the next slide. So I do want to let you know about the website studentaid.gov. This is your one-stop website for all things related to federal aid. When we look at the main page of studentaid.gov, you have a menu right here for the FAFSA. When you drop down that menu, you'll have an item, complete the FAFSA. That will bring you right to the application. We also have a menu here for loans and grants. That means you can learn everything you'd ever want to know about all the loans and grants that are available from the federal government. And then you also have information here about loan repayment and then loan forgiveness programs if you do decide to borrow from any of the federal loan programs. So lots of information all on this one website. They also have a resources page where you can uh, look, they have a whole series of videos about applying for aid that you can view. There are some print materials as well. So lots of information all from one website. With regard to the FAFSA itself, I do want to let you know that you do need to complete an application each year for each student you will have in college. So keep in mind that this is not a family application. It's not a parent application. This is it's a student application for aid. So each student needs their own application and they need it each year that they're interested in receiving aid. For the 25-26 FAFSA, you will be using income information from 2023. The FAFSA collects income from 2 years prior. It's called prior year. And so for 25-26, our 2 years prior is the 2023 income. Why is this? Because for the vast majority of people, your 2023 taxes are complete. They've been verified by the IRS. So that income is all validated and good. And so that way it can be directly imported right into the FAFSA itself. Making it easier and allowing for the FAFSA to be completed earlier that it used to be in the past as well. So it's a lot of positive reasons for moving to that prior year. So I do have a few slides with some tools that I want to tell you about. So some things that can assist you in the process or get you some information early on now that we're waiting now until December 1st for the FAFSA to be available. So one of the items that you can do ahead of time if you'd like is the Federal Student Aid Estimator. So if you'd like to get an idea of your student's federal aid eligibility, you can complete the Student Aid Estimator. You can find it through the direct link that I put on the slide. Or again, if you get yourself to studentaid.gov, you can type estimator into the search box and you'll be able to find it. I have the arrow there pointing to the fact that this is not an actual FAFSA form. So please don't think that by completing this that you've completed the actual FAFSA. And it also has been updated for the 25-26 year. So want to make you aware that that's something you can do ahead of time for an estimate. I also have another estimator option if you'd like. It's something called a net price calculator. Net price calculator allows you to get an early estimate of your aid eligibility at a particular college or university. So every college or university across the country is required to have a net price calculator on their website. If you'd like to get then an estimate of that aid eligibility at that particular school, you can complete the net price calculator. If you'd like to find out your eligibility at more than one school, then you would have to do multiple net price calculators. Unfortunately, there's not just one calculator to complete for all schools. They are school specific. But I did provide you with a link at the bottom of the slide that will take you to a website where you can just punch in the name of the school and then it will take you to that net price calculator so you don't have to search on each of the college's websites to find it. So it will help you cut down a little bit of time in the searching. You will have to provide some income information into a net price calculator in order for it to provide an answer. And it should also give you information, some estimated information about the cost, the overall cost of the institution as well. So hopefully that can be helpful to some of you to just start to get an early read on your eligibility. And I have one other tool that I want to tell you about. This is called the contributor tool. So contributor is a term that we use to describe any person who is whose information is included on a student's FAFSA. So a contributor is the student themselves, a parent, a spouse, a step parent can all be a contributor onto a FAFSA. And so what this tool can help you with is, as it says at the top, who counts as a parent on the FAFSA form. So this will allow you to make that determination. I'm going to give you some help as far as who the parent should be on a student's FAFSA as we go through the presentation. But I also want to let you know that this is available. You can access it through the link that I have on the bottom of the screen again, or if you just get yourself to studentaid.gov, you'll be able to find it there as well. So it's available without having to log into anything or be in the FAFSA application itself. It's a standalone tool that can help you in determining who goes on the FAFSA. So those are my tools for you. Next, I want to move into some terminology because there are some important terms in the financial aid process that you should be aware of, particularly as we move forward and your FAFSA is completed and you're getting financial aid award offers. You do want to have a bit of an understanding of these terms. So the first term is cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is the overall cost to attend an institution for the school year. So in my graphic, you can see that cost of attendance is made up of things like tuition and fees, um, housing and food, but also things like books and course materials and supplies, transportation, and miscellaneous expenses. Um, some people ask, well, what's with the transportation, miscellaneous, books, things like that? We want to be sure through the cost of attendance that students understand that there are more costs related to going to school than just making sure your tuition and fees or your housing and food, particularly if you're living on campus, is paid for. You do need to be prepared for the books and supplies. You do need to be prepared for transportation costs. You consider that students do need to get to and from campus, and that looks different for different students. If a student is living at home and going to school locally, so that could be almost, on a daily basis that they need to get to their college or university. Do they have a car? They need gas money. Do they need toll money? Is a student going a little further away? So are they going to be paying for rides to get home? Are they going to a school that's far enough away that it requires a plane ride? So you have to be prepared for that. Miscellaneous expenses are just different personal expenses like clothing and entertainment, and I say soap and shampoo and toothpaste, things that you need to live. Um, the college or university is not billing you for your transportation costs. They're not billing you for your miscellaneous expenses, and most schools don't bill directly for your books either. So it's not something that you'll see on the semester bill, but they are costs that you do need to be prepared for. So again, cost of attendance, overall cost to attend the institution for the school year. The next term I want to let you know about is the Student Aid Index, or SAI. The Student Aid Index is a number, and it's used to determine the eligibility for need-based aid. So need-based aid is financial aid that's based on financial information. So based on income information, asset information, family size, all the data that's collected on the FAFSA application. So when you submit your FAFSA, all the data that's contained in it is run through a federally mandated formula, and then it produces this number. And then we in the financial aid offices take this number called the Student Aid Index, and we use that to determine the student's eligibility for the need-based aid. Please note that the SAI is not the amount that you will pay. Also keep in mind too that the SAI can also be a negative number. Before there were changes made to the FAFSA starting with the current school year for 24-25, the lowest this could go down to would be a 0. But now with the Student Aid Index, we have our lowest Student Aid Index can be a negative 1,500, just so that you know, or if you happen to, when you see your Student Aid Index, when you process your FAFSA and you see a negative, I don't want anyone to panic. There's not a mistake. It can be a negative number. Last term that I want to tell you about is something called financial need. So I was saying with the Student Aid Index, we're using that to determine need-based aid. And so how are we determining who has financial need? So we're going to do the equation that you see on the screen. We're going to take the cost of attendance. So we're taking the overall cost to attend the institution for the school year. We're going to subtract from it your Student Aid Index, and that will give us the amount of financial need you have, and therefore the maximum amount of need-based or income-based financial aid the student can receive. If this equation works out that your student aid index exceeds the cost of attendance, then you would have no financial need. So for instance, just to talk in some round numbers, if we have a cost of attendance of 60,000, your student aid index is 80,000, you don't have any financial need. But the reverse, if the cost of attendance is 60,000 and your student aid index is 40,000, then you do have 20,000 in financial need. And that would mean that the school could potentially award up to $20,000 in need-based aid if it's available. So let's move on to some additional information related to the FAFSA itself. I do want to pass along just some of the general eligibility requirements for students to complete the FAFSA. So for students, they do ultimately need to earn their high school diploma or its equivalent. There is a place on the FAFSA for the student to list their high school. They'll be able to search for it and whatnot, but there'll be a spot for them to mark off that they earned a high school, that they'll be earning a high school diploma and then the school that they'll be earning it from. For the student to be awarded aid, the student does need to be accepted for enrollment in an eligible program. So that means you do have to be admitted to the college or university, and we at the college would have to have your FAFSA in order to put together an award offer. Students themselves do need to be U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens, and students also need to have a valid Social Security number. Okay, now in order to access the FAFSA, you're going to need something called a studentaid.gov account. Really, this account is your username and password that's used to access studentaid.gov, and it's used to access your FAFSA, but you can also log into the website to review information. Ultimately, if your student does borrow federal student loans, they can log in at studentaid.gov and review their borrowing, who their loan servicer is. So a lot of important information that they can get beyond just completing the FAFSA through having a studentaid.gov account. So I do want to let you know a few things about this account. Again, really, it's setting up the username and password. That's your account. All the contributors, as you can see on my slide, need to have a studentaid.gov account. So that means student needs their own account, and potentially one or two parents will need an account. As far as which parents, that's going to be determined by marital status and then also tax filing status. So just to keep in mind that it's not just parents, it is the student as well. You may also hear of this referred to as an FSA ID. That's what it was first called, and now it's been morphed into the studentaid.gov account. FSA stands for Federal Student Aid, so your Federal Student Aid ID. You can find the create an account like I show here on the screen at the link that I put on the slide. Again, if you don't want to go through that long of a link, if you get yourself to studentaid.gov, you'll be able to access this and set up the account. The other thing is this is something you can do before December 1st, and we would encourage you to do it before December 1st. So this way, this part of the process is done and set to go. I am going to provide you with a few additional tips that we've seen in this past year to help make sure that you have as seamless a process as possible with not only setting up the studentaid.gov account, but also with completing the FAFSA itself. So some tips to make sure you keep in mind as you're setting up the studentaid.gov account. When you enter your name and social security number, please make sure it's exactly as shown on your social security card, because behind the scenes, after you submit the request to set up this account, the information will be cross-checked with the Social Security Administration. And if you fail the check, then there's going to be additional steps that you'll need to take. So we want you to have it correct right from the start. Also, when you're setting this up and if you're using your name as it is on the Social Security card, you need to maintain that same way that you input your name through all the rest of the process. So sometimes this can trip up people who have multiple last names, that if you're card has 2 last names and you set this up with 2 last names, you need to carry through with 2 last names through the rest of the process, or the application, it'll hold up the FAFSA. It won't go through and create problems. Also, you will have to provide birth date. That too should match with what's on file with the Social Security Administration. You'll be asked to provide definitely an email address. A mobile phone number can be provided as well. Each person that sets up a studentaid.gov account needs to use their own email and their own mobile phone number. 2 people can't have the same information with a studentaid.gov account. It does have some things worked into it, so it would know if the email is already in use and not let you reuse that one. So that means student, when you set up your account, you're using your own email address, your own mobile phone number. Parent number 1, you're going to use your own email address and your own mobile phone number. And then if we have a parent number 2, same thing, their own email and their own mobile phone number. And I do recommend keeping a record of each of the contributors, their account information, especially if you decide that you do want to set it up ahead of time. It is still October. We're looking at December 1. You want to make sure that you keep this information, on file so that you have it to easily access once it is time to complete the FAFSA. Okay, so we're ready to actually start our FAFSA. We're at December 1st or later. And keep in mind, December 1, that would be the first day that you could complete it. It's not the deadline, it's opening day. As far as deadlines, what you'll want to check is with the schools that your student is applying to, do they have a deadline? Get your list of deadlines, whatever's the earliest one, that's your deadline. So, if you have a school that wants it by February 1st, and that's the earliest deadline you found, then make sure you have it submitted by February 1st. Obviously the sooner the better, but that's the way you can figure out what is your actual deadline for completing the application. So when we go to start the FAFSA, there will be an option to determine who is starting the FAFSA, the student or the parent. So it is possible for the parent to start the application on behalf of the student and then also complete the parent portion. The student will still have to do some steps. So it's parents, you can't sign off on the whole application. Your student would still need to provide consent to the transfer of tax data as well as sign the form. It's done electronically, even if you start the application. While parents, yes, you can start this process, we do recommend that the student be the one that start the process. Why? Because there are some known glitches when the parent does start the application, and it just does seem to be work smoother and be a better process when the student does start the application. But ultimately, up to you, just trying to pass along the recommendation. So I mentioned providing consent. With the simplification of the FAFSA that started with the 24-25 year, one of the items with the simplification was simplifying how the income information is applied to the FAFSA, and also coming up with ways to reduce the number of questions that you have to answer. So what we have now is that there is a direct data exchange with the IRS. You do have to provide consent to the data exchange. Please note that if any of the contributors on the FAFSA do not provide consent or decline the consent, the student will be ineligible for federal student aid. So it does need to be provided, and this is your consent to have that information brought into the FAFSA directly from the IRS. You won't even see the information. You won't see the questions and you won't see the answers. It's all happening behind the scenes, and it will be attached to the student's application. So this is helping you reduce significantly the number of questions that you have to answer. One of the things that I did want to mention with providing consent has fallen out of my head, so hopefully it will come back to me and then I can give you that information. But that was what it was. Also, the consent needs to be provided whether or not you file a tax return, because when the FAFSA is contacting the IRS to get your information, if there is a tax return that's filed, yes, it will carry over the income information, but it is also looking for the absence of a tax return to then report that whether it's the student or the parent is a non-filer. So it doesn't matter whether you file taxes or not, you do still have to provide the consent. That was what I wanted to make sure that I told you. After you provide the consent, you will see a screen pop up that it'll have in here, it'll have a progress bar. It only takes a few seconds, and it says that it's securely importing the information. And when it's done, success. And that's all that you'll see. And then you'll hit continue to move on to the next step in the application. When students initiate the FAFSA, they will have to invite their parent or parents to complete their portion of the application. This does happen in reverse. Parents, if you decide to start the application, you're going to invite your student to finish their portion of the application. So either way, we're inviting others to finish the application. But for students who are inviting their parent, there's going to be a screen that'll come up. They'll be asked to invite the parent, and then parents, you'll get an email that you'll be able to click on to go forward with your portion of the application. So in order for the invite to be sent, there is information that the student will need to enter. This is why some of the information I told you about the studentaid.gov account is important. When the student invites you as a parent, they need to make sure that the name, birth date, and social security number does match with what you used to set up the studentaid.gov account. And also parents, if any of you don't have a social security number, that's fine. There is a process for both the studentaid.gov account as well as here that you can mark off that you don't have a social security number. So please make sure that you do that, because then it does take you through a separate process for those without a social security number to create both the studentaid.gov account and to make sure that the invite goes through successfully. The only thing that does not have to match what you set up for the studentaid.gov account is the email address. The invite can go to any email address that you'd like. But again, the name, date of birth, and social security number need to match what the parent set up for their studentaid.gov account. And it also is recommended that the account is set up for the parent prior to the invite. Again, just makes it a smoother process. Parents, when you get the email, it's going to say something like, Susie has invited you to complete their FAFSA. You will have the opportunity to accept or decline the invitation and have a link to move forward with then logging into the application and completing the parent portion. A few other things that I just want to point out related to some of the questions that are on the FAFSA, just so that everybody is prepared. And I mentioned earlier that I would talk a little bit more about parents and marital status and who goes on the FAFSA. So with marital status on the FAFSA, it is as of the day the FAFSA is completed. So yes, we're importing income information from 2023, and that's how that's working. As far as marital status is concerned, it's as of the day the FAFSA is completed. You can see that we have several choices here. We've got single, never married, unmarried, and both legal parents living together, married, not separated, remarried, separated, divorced, widowed. So you've got lots of choices. I do want to point out for divorced or separated parents, the way that it works is only one parent is going to go on the FAFSA in those situations. It's going to be the parent who provided the greater portion of the student's total support. So you will have to come up with, if you're not sure or don't know, then you would need to figure out what is your student's total support, what is being paid for. We can include housing, food, think about whose health insurance, the student is on. Is a parent paying for a cell phone? Is someone paying for a car, for car insurance, things like that. So it's coming up with the student's total support and then who is paying the greater portion of that. When you go through that exercise, if you find that each of you are providing equal support to the student, so you're both 50-50, then it would default to the parent with the greater income or assets. And then if the divorced parent that's determined to go on the FAFSA, the one that provides more support or is the one with the greater income or assets, is remarried, if that parent is remarried, the step parent's information is required. So there will be a spot for that step parent's information. You will also have to confirm family size. So what it's going to do is the family size that it's going to pull will come from the 23 tax return. So it's going to be the number of like dependents that are on the tax return. So it's going to ask you, is the family size the same or not? And if it's the same, you can just answer yes and you'll move forward. If your family size is not the same as it was on the 2023 tax return, you can say no, and then it will allow you to manually enter whatever your current family size is. You can see here too that there is some additional information provided about who's included in the family size, so you can make the appropriate judgment. I also do recommend having the 2023 tax return handy, just so you can, if you're not sure what it was, you can double check it. Also, you will be asked to provide the number of children in the family size that are in college. It's always at least one because that's who you're completing the FAFSA for, but you may have multiple children in college. You will still report it. Please report it accurately, but when the FAFSA is processed, that formula, that the income and all the family size, all that information is run through, it will exclude the number in college. That is no longer part of that student aid index calculation. It used to be prior to FAFSA simplification, but it is no longer. So then why do they still have the question on the FAFSA? Because there are states that for the state aid, they still use the number in college, New Jersey being one of them. Also, there are colleges who, for their institutional aid, will use the number in college as well. So that's why it's still included on the FAFSA. It's just not part of the federal calculation. And then kind of my last highlight of information on the FAFSA are assets. So you can be asked about your assets on the FAFSA. And this is both for student and for parents. So basically, when it comes to income information, students and parents are asked the same questions on the FAFSA. So currently, assets include 4 items, or you'll find in the asset section 4 items. One of those will be annual child support received. Then we have the current total of cash savings and checking accounts, current net worth of investments, including real estate, and then finally, current net worth of businesses and investment farms. So the annual child support received is reported a little bit differently than the other items. So I'll go over that one first. So with the child support received, so again, it's what you received, and it would be the amount that was received in the last full calendar year. So what does that mean? And with our December 1st opening, it can mean different things depending upon when you complete your FAFSA. So let's say I complete my FAFSA in the middle of December and I receive child support. So it's December of 2024. I need to report the child support received in the last full calendar year. That would mean I'm reporting what I received actually in 2023. However, if I don't file my FAFSA until January or February, then I'm in 2025. And the last full calendar year is 2024. So I would be reporting what I received in 2024. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. The rest of the asset questions, cash savings, checking, investments, business, farm, you're reporting them all as of the day you complete the FAFSA. So our marital status is as of the day we complete the FAFSA, and our assets are as of the day we complete the FAFSA. I want to flesh out a little bit of information related to the investments, because there are a few exclusions to investments on the FAFSA. So when you go to calculate your net worth of investments, you do want to exclude the home that you live in. You'll exclude the value of any life insurance. and exclude whatever you have in retirement savings. So those are the three exclusions: home you live in, value of life insurance, retirement savings. Basically, everything else that you have is considered an investment. So, for example, if you own like stocks outside of your retirement fund, bonds, money market accounts, um, um, it's also real estate, but like again, we're accepting the home that you live in, but any other real estate that you have. Do you own land someplace? Do you have a condo down at the beach or a home on LBI, whatever it may be? If you have any other real estate outside of the home you live in, you do need to report the net worth. So that means you're going to do the calculation of how much is the property worth, subtracting any debt owed on the property, and that would give you your net worth. Also included in investments are the college savings plans. So for those of you that have the 529 college savings plans, there are some things to know about reporting them. We are looking for 529 or whatever kind of plan you have, accounts that are owned. So we're looking at ownership either by the student or by the parent. So those of you that have grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever it may be, who are owners of the plans, those are not reported as an investment on the FAFSA. So accounts owned by students and accounts owned by parents. If you have a student that is an owner, they will report the amount in their plan as a parent asset. That is the only exception as far as assets. If the student has any other assets, has their own checking account, savings account, that will be reported as a student asset. They make this one exception for the college savings plans. And also when you go to report the net worth, it's also going to be only the amount for the student who is completing the FAFSA. So that means if you have multiple children and you've set up multiple plans, it's only going to be the amount that currently has the student completing the FAFSA as the beneficiary. And then finally, your net worth of business or an investment farm. Make sure that you're including any land, any buildings, any machinery, equipment, inventory, and also subtracting out any debt, since it is net worth, against any of those items when you come up with the net worth of your business or investment farm. Okay, let's move on. Congratulations. You are getting to the end of your FAFSA. There is the sign and submit. Basically, the signing is checking the box and clicking the sign and submit. You do want to read through all of the information you'll see on the screen. This is basically saying that you are, everything on here is truthful to the best of your ability. Also that you're signing this using your own FSA ID, and then you would submit. I do apologize. This last bullet, I still have not found the best place that I want to put this information, but also before your student gets to the sign and submit part, there will be a section where they'll be able to list the colleges and universities that they want to receive this information, and they can list up to 20. If your student still has more than 20 schools in the running when you complete the FAFSA, what you'll have to do, put 20 on the initial submission of the application. When you're notified that it's been processed, you can log back in and you'll have to overwrite some of the initial 20 with the additional schools that you want to receive the information, as it cannot hold more than 20 schools at one time. That will be prior to signing off on it. Okay. And then ultimately, when you've done it successfully, for each section, you'll get this congratulations screen, and then what tells you what happens next. So that lets you know for sure that the particular portion of the FAFSA has been completed. After completion, it will take a few business days for the application to be processed. And then ultimately, the student gets back what's called the FAFSA submission summary. At the same time, the information is going out to the colleges and universities listed on the application. And also for New Jersey, all those people that list New Jersey as their state of legal residence, the information is automatically going to the New Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. The FAFSA submission summary. So what is this? This is your confirmation that your FAFSA has been fully processed. You'll be able to review all your answers. You have all your FAFSA form answers. So you can review what you submitted for accuracy. I do recommend doing a double check right at that point, because then you can catch any mistakes. If you didn't catch them the first time around, make the corrections and get that, the correction moving. Or if it's to add more schools, you can do that as well. And it will provide you with the next steps, as well as an overview of your estimated federal aid eligibility. It's truly just an estimate on the FAFSA submission summary of the eligibility. It does take a few business days for a student's FAFSA to be processed. So we do not receive them in real time. So if you call us a few minutes after submitting, hitting that submit button, we will not have it. I promise you, we will not. What's happening to take a few days? There are additional verifications that are going on behind the scenes. It's doing a check. If the student lists that they're a citizen, it's checking that with Social Security, and again, making sure that the data matches with what they have. If a student lists they're an alien registration number, it's checking that with Department of Homeland Security. It's checking to make sure they haven't borrowed more federal loans than are allowed. Obviously, yes, a first-year student hasn't borrowed at all, but I'm just saying these are some of the checks that are going on behind the scenes. If students answer that they, and there's a section, if they answer yes to being a veteran, it's going to check that with Veteran Affairs. So there are multiple verification checks that are happening and take a little bit of time to be completed. And then once that's done, information again, confirmation sent back out to the student and then to the schools. I do also want to provide you with some additional recommendations, again, just to help you have the smoothest application process as possible. So we do recommend completing the FAFSA on a laptop or a desktop. While it can be completed on a phone, we do seem to find that having a little bit more screen space is helpful. Because sometimes on the phone, you may have to scroll because it doesn't all fit and things like that. And especially with the consent and signing and submitting, it's a lot of text to read through. So we do find that you may have just a little bit easier time when you're using either a desktop or a laptop. If you run into any glitches or it's not working correctly, you can always save out of the application, change your browser. Sometimes that's what it might be. Reboot your computer, clear your cache. I know that some of these things sound like, when you when you call in for help and they tell you turn it off and turn it on, it may help. Again, if you do run into trouble. Hopefully you don't, but I just want to give you these pointers in case you do. Do you also recommend turning off any automatic password saving that you might have on the device that you're using, especially if it's a device that you might share or both student and parent might use the same device to complete the FAFSA? Because once you have that automated login information, it's going to always, whenever you pull up that site, it's always going to keep logging in that same person. And sometimes that creates a problem. You're thinking you're logged in as one person when you're actually logged in as someone else. And then that's why you can't complete what you went in there to do. And that's also why it's important to make sure you have the correct contributor that is logged in, again, to complete the appropriate portions of the application. Certainly read the instructions and review everything before submitting. It's not that things can't be corrected. Yes, certainly you can make corrections. Again, having a correct form right from the beginning just makes the overall process that much smoother. Involve the student in this process. It's their aid, it's their application. So they should have an idea of what's going on related to their financial aid. Communications that we send out go directly to the student. Their semester bills go directly to them. So please keep in mind that the student should be involved in this process. Don't expect them to be financial aid experts, but at least to have an idea of what's happening. And when you have questions, don't hesitate to contact a financial aid officer. We are happy to help you with questions that you have. This is the type of thing, we work in a financial aid office. It's what we do day in and day out. And particularly, if you're looking at first choice, second choice schools, talk directly to that financial aid office. We can tell you whatever, your question might be, the answer, the situation, how our particular school would handle it. So don't be afraid to reach out. Okay, so now that we've got our FAFSA completed, I want to move on to some other information for you. So one of those is, what's the rest of the process? So after I get that FAFSA completed, what else might I need to do? You do want to check with any other schools that your student is interested in to see if there are any additional applications that they need. So do they have any separate scholarship applications you need to complete? Is it a school that collects the CSS profile? CSS profile is a completely separate financial aid application from the FAFSA. It's put out by the College Board, used by maybe about 350, 400 schools across the country. The schools that use it are generally private, but not all. There are some public institutions that do use it, and they generally have a large amount of institutional funds, and they want to get some more information from you than what the FAFSA will provide. The CSS profile does not determine federal eligibility. The FAFSA would still be the application for federal aid. The profile is going to be for the institutional aid at the schools that use it. And as I said, they can ask more questions than what's on the FAFSA. I mentioned those exclusions from investments for federal purposes. Profile may ask you about that, ask you about the value of your home, the value of your retirement plans. I said that, when parents are divorced or separated, we're putting only one parent on the FAFSA. Well, profile can ask for information from the non-custodial parent. So again, it's a completely different application, different purpose than the FAFSA. Once you've got all your applications completed, then you would get something called the Financial Aid Award Offer. So even though the federal government on that FAFSA submission summary is giving you an overview of potential aid eligibility, it's the schools themselves that award the student. And what we're doing in our award offer is putting together all of the resources for the student. So we're putting together all of the institutional aid along with all of the federal aid for the schools in New Jersey. We're also then including any state aid eligibility. So we're putting everything together in one spot, in one communication to the student. In order to receive a financial aid award offer, you have to have listed the school on the FAFSA so that we receive your FAFSA. And then also you need to be admitted to the school in order for that to be processed. You may also be asked to provide additional documentation. Both the federal government and state of New Jersey, as well as schools, can select applications for verification. So please make sure if you do get a request to submit additional documentation, you submit it as soon as possible. And then if you're going to use any student loans, the school will walk you through that process. Sources of aid. We don't want to leave any sources of aid untouched. So first, we always want to check with what the college, so that's institutional, has available. There's aid that we call merit-based aid. Merit-based aid is based on prior academic performance, grades, and potentially test scores, depending upon school and whether you're submitting test scores, SAT, ACT. Colleges may have need-based aid, so aid that's from the college based on financial information. Schools may have one or the other or some combination of both. So that's everything that's different from college to college. Completing your FAFSA takes care of your federal eligibility as well as, and then also is basically your application for state aid as well. And then you have other sources of aid. This is not an exhaustive list, but some of the highlights here for other sources. Your student may be eligible for an athletic scholarship at the particular college or university they're attending. There are also outside scholarships. These are the scholarships that Mrs. Nectarline talked about that with the school has a whole program of local scholarships, and then as well as their resources for additional outside scholarships. And I have some resources on a slide as well. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Veterans benefits. If I have any veterans in the audience, you may be able to transfer your benefits or your eligibility to your dependent. You do need to reach out, you as the veteran, to the VA to see what your eligibility is. So that would start the process. There are also something called resident assistantships. These would be available at schools where students are living on campus. And being a resident assistant means that you're supervising a floor of students in a residence hall. And being a resident assistant generally comes with financial compensation. And there are also tax credits for higher education. So you may be able to get a credit on your tax return for the cost of higher education. To read more about the tax credits that are available, it's IRS Publication 970. So Publication 970 will give you, it's a comprehensive publication from the IRS about all things related to higher ed. So as I said, I'll give you a few more resources for additional outside grants and scholarships. So again, making sure you're using the local resources at your school, and then a global reach using the internet. I know when Mrs. Nectarline put up her screen, I think we have a couple websites that we both have as resources, and then we have a couple that differ. So that'll give you, between both websites, will give you a pretty robust list of scholarship search engines. These are all free, so that you don't have to pay. With several of them, it's setting up a profile of yourself within the site. That's what happens, like, for instance, with fastweb.com. The student sets up an account, sets up a profile of themselves, and then FastWeb will match that profile to its database of hundreds of thousands of scholarships, and then return to the student those that they may qualify for. It does not apply the student to a scholarship. The student will still have to ultimately do an application. It cuts down on the research part so that you don't have to, get a book of 1,000 pages of scholarships and read all of that. It's, doing that through their database match. So hopefully some of these sites will be of help to you. And also, these types of scholarships are not just for high school seniors going into college. There are scholarship programs for students who then are already in college. So this would be an annual process that you would want to go through, just like completing the FAFSA. You would still want to continue an outside scholarship search while you're in school. Keeping your profile, if you set up with FastWeb, keeping that updated. Once you're in school, what clubs, what organizations have you joined? Once you have a GPA in college, what is that? So that you're keeping that updated and keeping the most broad range of opportunities available. So when we get our financial aid award offers from the school and we're reviewing them, we do want to understand what it is that we're looking at. So we have different types of aid that you might see on a financial aid award offer. So you may see something that's called a grant. So if anything says grant on the end of it, that is free money. It does not have to be repaid. Grants generally are based on financial need, not all the time, but in general. So know that if you see something that says grant on the end of it, you want that free money. We also have the Federal Work Study Program. This is a way to earn money while you're in school. The FAFSA is the application for Federal Work Study, so no separate application. You do have to have financial need to qualify, but those that do would be eligible to get a job, and generally most of them are on campus, so don't need a car. Then also, you might find loans listed on your financial aid award offer. This is money that's borrowed, and it does have to be repaid. Student loans are just like any other type of loan that you might borrow, does have to be repaid. So just keep in mind, if anything says loan on the end, it has to be repaid. And then finally, you may see scholarships. While this slide shows that it's earned money, it's also free money that you don't have to repay. But scholarships, where they say here that it's earned money, because generally with a scholarship, you have earned that scholarship through your grades, through a talent, through some sort of characteristic. So that's how you've earned it. But again, scholarships do not have to be repaid. I'm going to very briefly go over some of these aid programs because you can, for the federal aid programs, you can go to studentaid.gov, read all about them. You can, for the state information that I have up here, HESA.org stands for the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. You can go to their website to read all about the programs. One of the handout links that's on the high school page is about the New Jersey tuition aid grant. So I did provide that brochure itself. So you'll be able to get that right on the high school website. But as far as federal grant programs are concerned, we have the federal Pell Grant, which is a grant need-based, so based on financial information, does not have to be repaid. It is for the most needy students. FSEOG, or the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, is generally awarded to those students who are also eligible for the federal Pell Grant. Teach Grant is a grant not need-based for those students interested in teaching, and you do need to be interested in teaching in a high-need subject area in a low-income district. And there is a teaching requirement after you graduate that must be met in order to maintain the money that you receive through the grant program. NJTAG, or the Tuition Aid Grant, that's the state's need-based grant program. When your FAFSA information goes to the state, that it is determining the eligibility for the tuition aid grant. Again, need-based grant for students remaining in New Jersey for college. EOF, or the Educational Opportunity Fund program, is for students both economically and academically disadvantaged. NJ STARS is a merit-based program from the state of New Jersey for students in the top 15% of their class. They can go for NJ STARS 1, they can go to their local community college, basically tuition free. If they successfully complete the STARS 1 program, then they can move on to any four-year institution in New Jersey for NJ STARS 2 and receive additional scholarship funding. It's not a full coverage at the four-year colleges, but it is an additional scholarship. And then finally, the NJ College Promise program, need-based. So it's based on income information. There is a part of the College Promise, there's a community college opportunity grant, so something that can be received at the community college level, and then the Garden State Guarantee that can be used in third and fourth years at public institutions. So again, if any of those spark your interest, go to HESA.org. You can read all about them. I do want to spend just a couple minutes talking to you about loans, student loans, because if you exhaust all your grant and scholarship resources and still need help to bridge the gap, you may need to take a look at the loan options. So the Federal Direct Loan Program is a federal loan program for students. Students are the borrower of the loan. There's no credit check involved and no cosigner. However, with the Federal Direct Loan Program, students are limited in the amount that they can borrow each year. It's based on their grade level. And for first-year students, $5,500 or $5,500 is the maximum that they can borrow in their first year. It is possible to receive some of that funding without it accruing interest. Within the Direct Loan Program, there's a loan called a subsidized loan. Have to have financial need, but it does not accrue interest while the student's in school or for 6 months after. If there's no financial need, or once the subsidized loan is exhausted, then there may be additional funds that can be received through an unsubsidized loan that does accrue interest while the student's in school. Then my last two bullets, Federal Parent Plus and private education loan, can really be used for whatever remaining balance you have. And in actuality, with both Parent Plus or a private education loan, you can borrow up to the cost of attendance. That means you can borrow for whatever you need for tuition and fees, housing and food. If you need money for the books, for the transportation, for the personal expenses, you can borrow for those additional expenses through either Parent Plus or a private loan. What are these loans? Parent Plus is a loan for parents from the federal government. It is credit-based, so there is a credit check involved. A parent is the borrower, and a parent is the one responsible for repayment. A private education loan is offered by a bank, a student loan lender, credit union, many state, including New Jersey, state agencies also have what would be considered a private loan. With private loans, they do allow students to borrow, but they'll need a cosigner. With these credit-based loans, first-year students, and probably be prepared for the entire time that they're an undergraduate, are not going to qualify for a credit-based loan on their own. So really, families do need to be prepared to either borrow for the student, whether it's borrowing on their behalf through a Parent Plus or co-signing through a private education loan. So I just want to make you aware that those are the loan options that are out there. And my final bit of information to you guys is if you have a change in your financial circumstances since 2023, that's the year that we're using for income on the FAFSA. And, we're already coming to a close, coming pretty close to the end of 2024. So if there has been a change in circumstances, a school can address that. As my last bullet says, don't try to change the FAFSA. You shouldn't be able to, but also don't even try. Any changes to the income information would be handled at the college level. You would submit to the college the documentation of your particular situation. We will review, determine whether it's something we can accept, and then we'll move forward with making the changes to the income and then reevaluating the aid eligibility. I listed some circumstances on the screen. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just some of the things that we see most frequently. So I just want to make you aware that that's how the process for changes is managed. So I do want to thank you all for joining today. And I am happy to move into the Q&A portion for those of you that have put questions out there. And
Awesome. That's great.
yes, are you back?
Kristen, we're back. That was
Okay.
great. Yeah, so we do have several questions in. You will be able to see them as the co-host. I would just go ahead and unshare your screen just
Sure.
so that the people, their names, because some of them are just some more personal financial questions, but I think they actually may impact others, just some different situations. So Kristen, I just want to make sure you can see them on your screen down in the Q&A. There looks to be 8 that I did not answer because they are
Okay.
definitely much better for an expert answer. And I
Sure.
read through them and, short of identifying people, which we asked not to, I'm fine with you sharing them because there certainly could be another situation. So if you want to take the first one, I think a lot of these people are still on and tuning in, and we'll see if
Sure.
any others pop in there while we're talking.
Okay, so we do have a question. Yes, I'll rephrase them
Sure.
to, so that they, yes.
No, nothing identifying, right?
No, don't worry, no names, no names.
Okay.
So we have someone who's asking about based on their job situation, their income fluctuates from year to year. Um, uh, and asking whether they can put their income from 2024 on the FAFSA versus what was 2023. So no, you won't be able to do that. You will, when you provide the consent on the FAFSA for that data exchange of income, it is going to automatically go out to the IRS and collect the 2023 information. If you would like your 24 information reviewed or replaced on the FAFSA, that's something, like I just said here at the end, you would have to address directly with the college that your student plans to attend, or at least the top few colleges that they'd like to attend. So you can't make adjustments. The FAFSA has to be completed in the way that it's directed to be completed. All right, so let's move on to the next one. Yes, this is a very good question because I didn't specifically address this. So we talked about having contributors and things like that on the FAFSA. And I had made one mention that the number of contributors depends upon marital status and tax filing status. So if you are married and filing jointly, only one parent will need to be a contributor because it only requires one parent to provide the consent. But if you are married filing separately, then yes, each parent will need their own studentaid.gov account. They'll each need to be invited as a contributor because you'll each need to provide the consent for your individual tax return. So that's the way it would work if you are married filing separately. Okay, so we have another marital status question asking if okay, so way I'm gonna read this is that we have the student's legal parents divorced at some point in time, and the parent in question is the one that provides more support to the student. That parent married someone else, so they were remarried, but now is also separated from that spouse. So that the current marital status then would be separated. Okay, we don't go back to like the what the legal parents marital status is. It's as of the day the FAFSA is completed. So I'm going to say if you are remarried, but then again separated, it's separated. Let's see. Okay, so we have a question about the studentaid.gov account. And I I actually made some changes to the presentation after I gave it last night at a school and tried to tweak things because there was some confusion on this. I'm doing my best to try to separate these out. When you set up the studentaid.gov account, that is not the FAFSA itself. That is simply setting up the access into the FAFSA and establishing a username and password. You will not be entering any income information or anything like that in order to set up the studentaid.gov account. You will actually log into the FAFSA application itself, and that's where all the data that we talked about will be provided. Okay. So December 1st is the first day of FAFSA. We're expecting to be the first day of FAFSA filing. Colleges, each college, yes, they can set up their own deadline. So that is something that's on a school by school basis because ultimately the FAFSA itself, uh, it's available for more than a year, but you can't wait that long to complete it because you want to be sure that you have financial aid awarded before the bill for the fall semester is due. But if you think of a student who maybe decides not to go to school in the fall and decides to go in the spring, so they hadn't filed a FAFSA, we still that has to be available for them to do that. So you know, again, it would be available, but you'll use the colleges that your student is interested in for deadline purposes. So again, an income question, and someone's asking because they're self-employed and do they, what type of income is listed? Again, you should not have to manually enter any income. It's going to be automatically transferred over from the IRS. There's some very limited situations where it would have to manually be reported, but in the grand scheme, the vast majority of people, it will be transferred over. And as I said, you will not see the income questions, nor will you see the answers that were pulled from the IRS. Okay. Okay, I think we addressed this one. This was if it's married and filing jointly. Do we, how many parent account, do both parents need an account? No, we just need one with married and then married filing jointly. Yes. And then also, if a parent already has an account from another child, you don't need to create another one for the new child. As any person, you only need one studentaid.gov account, and then you can use that for many purposes. So when you have your own studentaid.gov account, you can file your own FAFSA. You can use it as the parent for as many children as you have. So you don't need multiple accounts, just one per human. So let's see. So the question is about being divorced and living in the same home. Actually, so there is a marital status on the FAFSA that is unmarried, but both legal parents living together. So if you are still under the same roof and you're both the legal parents, then you would both need to, that would be the marital status then.
I think we have a
that was that was a duplicate
next one.
there.
Yeah,
Okay.
we answered that.
Okay. So the question, we have another question about, well, so if I have like my older child and they did a FAFSA last year, so will this year's FAFSA pull the data from last year's form? That is a very good question. We are only in the first time that this has happened. Before 24-25, yes, the FAFSA maintained demographic information. I'd like to think that it would, but you know what? Not in anything that I've seen so far has really answered that specific question. I apologize that I can't give you a specific answer for that. Um, Again, even if you do have to re-enter everything with the simplified FAFSA, obviously it's not a significant number of questions. Um, if you do, I apologize that I'm sorry. I really haven't seen, I'll have to look around for something about, see if I can get any further information about that. Obviously, yes, the consent needs to be provided each year because we're changing the year of the tax data that's done, and that's not a blanket consent for the rest of your life. You do need to consent again each year and sign again each year. Okay, so we have a question about loans. So let's say I'm good for my student's first year. I don't need to borrow anything. Maybe I've got enough in the 529 savings plan or whatever it may be. So is it possible to then borrow in subsequent years? Yes, of course, because we go through the financial aid process every year. I mean, you can even go on a semester by semester basis. If something happens or you have enough money for the first year and one semester, you could certainly apply for loans in that second semester. So yes, it's certainly possible to be, flexible with that. Then we have any other. Okay, so we have a question here asking about the income and determining need-based versus merit-based aid. So first of all, merit-based aid is not based on any income information. So there's no income limit or anything with merit-based aid. Colleges that award it are looking back at the student's prior academic performance. So they're looking at their high school grades. If the student is submitting standardized test scores, those may be included in the review. Not anything income related. Then is there an income cutoff for need-based aid? There isn't necessarily a hard and fast line because with the FAFSA, like we saw, we're not just collecting income information from your taxes. You're also providing the asset information, that child support information if it's appropriate, and we also have the family size. So even thinking about family size, you could have two families. The income is exactly the same, but what if I have one family that's one parent and one child? And then I have another family that's two parents and three children, and both of those families are making the same amount of money. There's a difference there because of more people versus less people in the family. So there isn't a hard and fast rule. I always recommend to everybody apply for everything in that first year. Make sure you're covering all your bases, and then ultimately, when your student settles on where they're going to be attending, you've worked out the aid. When it's time to complete the FAFSA for the second year, you can always check with the college and say, okay, it's coming to be FAFSA time. Based on, what my student had this year, do we need to file the FAFSA again? And what are they if they say, nope, you don't need to, then you don't. If they say, oh yeah, you're going to lose this, this, and this if you don't file, then make sure you do. That's my best advice. Oh, yes.
I think just one more popped in there, Kristen, and we'll take that
Yes.
as the last, and then I'll address the one underneath that
Oh,
one.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yes, a follow-up to our what I considered the unmarried and both parents living together. So yes, if it's a I think it should work out if you're, no, you know what? This is a very good question. Whether both parents will need to be contributors. I think that there is a question in the FAFSA ahead that will ask, I'm just not sure what the order is, whether it asks if you filed jointly first and then the marital status. I think it might be the other way around. What I would recommend to that parent is I would be prepared to have both parents be contributors just to be on the safe side. And I'm sorry, I do apologize if for a couple things. I don't know. There has been, for those of you that don't know, the FAFSA did undergo an incredible overhaul for 24-25. I have on the chair next to my desk, what size notebook is that? What the notebook that's like about this wide of webinars that we had to go through just for the first go around. And things have morphed and changed as we've gone through that process. So in a way, I'm still learning, and we're still learning from students that are still coming in stuck on things. So I'm doing my best to, gather and know everything for you. So I think with that, parent, just be prepared that both of you might have to um, be contributors. And that way you're prepared. And if you don't have to, then great, less information you need to provide.
Great. Oh, thanks, Kristen. That was a lot of different questions that were put in there, and there's still quite a few people hanging on and listening. I know we're going to close up here in a couple minutes, but great advice. I think I've told you several times before, I don't envy the last 12 to 18 months for my dear colleagues and friends in financial aid. And I've seen it firsthand in my campus visits and talking with my friends in admissions who work directly with financial aid officers. This has been a rocky year. We're hopeful for a better end to 24 as far as December 1 and the FAFSA opening. With that, I want to address the last question that came in asking if Hunterdon Central will be producing any type of guides to filling out the FAFSA, just like we do to our Common App guide. So I'll be completely honest, financial aid counseling and financial aid officer is a completely different profession than that of a school counselor. And I am very honest about what I'm expert in and what I'm not. And so school counselors don't have the level of expertise, knowledge, and background and professional development as financial aid officers. We'll obviously listen tonight and hear the information our parents are hearing, but I will be honest, over 90% of the financial aid questions I'm going to get as a high school counselor are going to get deferred to studentaid.gov. So we are not in a place or have any professional experience to be able to give advice on the FAFSA outside of just general FAFSA knowledge. And on top of that, with the changes over the last year, we're going to refer the vast majority of questions to studentaid.gov, to the FAFSA helpline, which was very helpful for families last year that were going through a lot of the issues we had in the new FAFSA. So I'm proud of the guides we make on getting students through the college planning process and into colleges, but we'll always refer back to our dear friends and our experts like Kristen in financial aid. And honestly, when our seniors start getting into colleges, and some are starting to hear it's very early, that's very rare, but come winter and obviously through second semester and into spring, our students are going to start to hear, and they can utilize those schools or that narrowed down list of one or two schools where they're deciding on and call those financial aid offices for direct assistance. So there are a lot of resources. As we get information about the FAFSA, about the requirement for New Jersey seniors to fill out, we will put that on our website. So you can trust that everything that we know, you all will know, but very often we're going to refer you to studentaid.gov and to the experts. So if you got a chance to listen to most of this, wonderful. Thank you all. If you tuned in a little late, just come back and check out the recording. We're going to get this on the Hunterdon Central YouTube station within just a few days. So keep an eye open for that. But in the early couple minutes, I talked about the FAFSA requirement for New Jersey high school seniors. I talked a little bit about scholarships at Hunterdon Central and what we're going to be doing in the coming months. And then also about some of the resources on our Hunterdon Central website, which is under the college and career menu, under FAFSA and financial aid. So please check those out. Tune in for any other information we send out, but definitely check out the beginning of this program and all that Kristen had to share. Really good information. Kristen, good luck this year with your FAFSA reviews and everything that's coming. We appreciate your time every year.
Thanks for having me, everyone. Good luck in your process and your student finding their new home away from home.
Yeah, it always happens. It always works out. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you so much and take care. Bye-bye.